So hey there friends, welcome to this episode of SelfKind with me, Erica Webb. Today we're going to talk about why self-compassion can feel so darn hard at times and what you can do about it when that is true for you. All right, if you are a regular listener, you might have noticed that I disappeared again. I'm not going to lie, I'm going through a little bit of a tricky time at the moment. And so I am doing what I recommend all highly sensitive people to do, which is to pull back on things that perhaps are pull back onable, that you don't have to show up for real. You know, sometimes everything can feel like it's necessary. And, you know, the podcast for me is a piece of my world that I love, and I certainly have no intentions of giving up. But it has been, I guess, one place where it's been a little bit easier just to pull back and say, okay, well, I didn't get to that. Maybe next week. At some point, I will talk more about why I'm having such a hard time at the moment, but rest assured, I am well, I am okay, just navigating some stuff that is a little tricky. But I wanted to record some stuff today. And so I am going to talk a little bit about why self-compassion can feel actually very hard as a highly sensitive person and why it's worth persisting with. It's an interesting concept, self-compassion, and I thought that that's where we could start, is like, what does it actually mean? Because it's one of those words that you probably hear thrown around reasonably often. I talk about it a lot, but I'm trying to remember when might have been the last time that I actually paused to talk about, you know, the components of it and certainly why it can feel really hard sometimes. So I wanted to do that today. So the components of self-compassion, let's start there. Compassion in general, right? It is the same notion, whether it's compassion towards others or compassion towards ourselves, it's still made up of the same elements. One is offered out and one is offered in. And I would argue that our capacity to be self-compassionate is directly proportional to our ability to be compassionate towards others. That's something to chew over. So what is self-compassion? What is compassion? My go-to definition for this comes from Kristin Neff. So Dr. Kristin Neff is an amazing researcher who's done a lot of work around self-compassion. So her definition is the one that I absolutely go to. And she talks about compassion being composed of three parts. The first is mindful awareness. Now, mindful awareness is an awareness of what is true and what you're experiencing in any particular moment. And so mindful awareness is about saying, oh, this is a moment of suffering for me or for you, depending on whether it's going in or out, and I can see that. I see your pain, I see your discomfort, I see your suffering, I see the reality of that for you. The second part is shared humanity, which essentially says, I am human and therefore I will suffer. I am human and I am not alone in my suffering or my pain or my self-doubt or my discomfort or whatever the thing is. So shared humanity says it is part of being human to have this kind of feeling, and I am not alone in that. Or when we are offering compassion to another, that shared humanity is really demonstrated in our willingness to be present to somebody else's discomfort and to say, oh, I empathize. So that's the second part. The third part is kindness. And in my opinion, kindness is an action. Kindness is something that we do. And in being compassionate, we are, I think, inherently being kind because we are saying something that is supportive of that person's experience. It's not dismissive. It's not like, go on, get on with it. You know, pull your socks up, just get on, don't worry about it. It is like, oh gosh, I see that you're having a hard time and I'm here. Let me support you somehow, whether it's with, you know, just your physical presence, whether it is with a phone call, whether it is with a hug, whether it is with the words of like, you are doing your best, right? So kindness is an action, which isn't necessarily a, you know, like huge thing. It can be something very small, like your words, your presence, etc. But it is an action. It is kindness. So they're the three parts of compassion. And within that is the reason why compassion can feel so hard. And it's that first part, that mindful awareness that says, this is a moment of suffering. That's not easy. That is not easy, because our tendency is to say, moment of suffering, what else can I do? How else can I distract myself? How can I make this go away? How can I numb this? How can I quiet this? How can I just shut this part up? And we come by that very honestly as humans, because for a lot of us growing up, we were probably told that, especially if you're a highly sensitive person. Oh, come on, it's not that bad. You're okay. I've said this as a mother and as a person. I've said this. So it's not about, blaming and shaming people, although I'm sure that we could also say, hey, other people have a responsibility too to choose their words. Absolutely. But there is the simple truth that in our society, sort of just like sitting down and saying, this is crap, isn't generally how it's done. And so to say, well, to be compassionate is going to require you to look your suffering in the face and say, there it is. And I'm not trying to make it go away, and I'm not trying to quiet it, and I'm not trying to tell it that it's fine. I'm actually saying, wow, this is hard. And what do I need to be supported in this? Not what do I need to make it go away? What do I need to make it less? But just like, what do I need? Given that this is the reality, given that this is what I'm experiencing, what do I need? What is the kindness that I require? So that is why it's hard, right? And as a highly sensitive person, one of the things that I'm really struck by is that our tendency to have high standards for ourselves can make that hard as well. Because if you have an opinion of yourself that says, well, I should be able to get on with things, I should be able to keep up with everyone, I should just be able to get over this, whatever this is, I should be able to toughen up or whatever the thing is, then you're going to hold yourself to that standard. And so then offering yourself compassion and saying, oh, well, actually I'm having a moment of suffering and I really require kindness right now, that inner voice might say, really? Couldn't you just get on with it? And so, it's tied in a little bit, I guess, to perfectionism. It's tied in a little bit to people pleasing, because sometimes our discomfort really makes things uncomfortable for other people. And there's no way around that, right? I mentioned that, I'm going through a thing at the moment, which, I actually hate being vague about, but I'm not quite there yet to lay it all out. So I apologize. I don't do it on purpose. I'm certainly not doing it. Not doing it on purpose. I'm doing it on purpose, but I'm not doing it for any yucky reasons. It's just I need to process a bit more. But I'm okay. My kids are okay. My husband's okay. My pets are okay. It's all okay. So where was I going with that though? But I have made a point of being honest about the fact that I'm not actually at my best right now. And so when people say, hey, you're looking well, how are you? I've kind of, in places where I feel safe to do so, been like, yeah, no, actually I'm not great. I'm not going to lie. I can't lie to you right now, because it wouldn't feel kind to me to just dismiss the reality of how I'm feeling, which is not great. So that is unusual though, is my point. That is not something that I've ever seen modeled. That's not something that I've really ever seen demonstrated, but it's felt very needed for me, because I'm very committed to compassion. I'm very committed to not making my experience wrong and not making myself wrong and not shitting on myself for being human. So, I'm sort of looking at my notes here and they're making me stumble a little bit, so I'm going to leave my notes out of this. I think it's important to recognize that if you find self-compassion difficult, if you've tried it before and you're like, why does this feel so uncomfortable? You're not alone. You are absolutely not alone. It doesn't mean you're bad at self-compassion. It doesn't mean you are an uncompassionate person. It just means that we're hitting up against something that says acknowledging your suffering might not be a good idea, right? And that's fair, because a lot of us will have a lot of evidence over a lifetime that says bringing your suffering to the table doesn't end well, right? because we've been told we're too sensitive. Stop crying. Why are you being such a sook? Why are you whinging again? Oh, come on, just get on with it. We have the evidence that our suffering makes other people uncomfortable, is inconvenient, and maybe we shouldn't feel like that. So yeah, if you're going to look your suffering in the face and you've been exposed to a lot of messaging like that, it's going to feel hard. So that itself requires our compassion, which is ironic, right? Is that the correct usage of ironic? I think so. But it is, it's like, oh, that requires my compassion because compassion feels hard. So yeah, I want to give you a little bit of something tangible to walk away with here. And part of that tangibility, I hope, is just a recognition that, like, if this is your experience, okay, like, I believe you. It's hard. It's not the easiest thing to do. But if you are curious about how it could also change things for you, because I think that it is a deep key to finding a sense of peace as a highly sensitive person. And that might not be like peace every second of every day, but a sense of like inner trust, a sense of, when I come home to myself and when I kind of like go in to my inner voice, my inner world, my inner landscape, it is a soft place to land. It is a kind and compassionate place. It isn't a cruel place where I rehash all of those things that I've been told about my sensitivity. It's a place where it's like, no, you're okay. You're okay. You really are. And not only that, you're loved, right? And you are accepted and you are whole in this place. So if you're like, yeah, I want more of that, then we have to persist with continuing to try to be self-compassionate. And so I want to offer you 2 tips. I think I have 2. Well, as I said, I've abandoned my notes, so I've got 2, I think. The first one is, and I've said this before, I will say it many times more. What would you say to a friend? That might be the only thing you need to do, is think, okay, if my best friend was experiencing this and I didn't want to dismiss them and how they felt, what would I say? It doesn't have to solve the problem. That's literally the point, right? We're not trying to solve the problem. We are literally just trying to say, oh, that is hard. I am sorry you are feeling that way. And I'm here, right? So that is probably the easiest way. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's probably the easiest way to kind of think, okay, well, what might self-compassion look like in this moment? What would it be like if I was just talking to a friend? I've completely lost track of my second tip. So let's just give me a moment and see if it comes back. I remembered. I had to pause. I'm not going to lie. I had to pause there and like really think for a second. What was my second tip? So my second tip is around this process that I love from acceptance and commitment therapy that's called diffusion. And the idea is to create a little bit of space between you and the thought that you're having that is maybe not helpful. So in that instance where maybe you're trying self-compassion and what's happening in your head is saying, oh, come on, like you actually could do better. Why are you being like this, right? It's giving you the echo of all those messages that you've received. It's giving you perfectionism. It's giving you people pleasing. It's giving you anything that is kind of stopping you from being able to say, well, actually, this is suffering, this is hard, and I am worthy of kindness. What can be really helpful is to use this technique of diffusion to just crack open a little bit of space between you and that thought, or that thought and you believing it. And so my favorite way to do that is to say, oh, that's interesting. I'm having the thought that I'm not worthy of this compassion. What if I was though, right? What would that look like? What would I say? And so it can be just a simple extra thought. Oh, that's interesting. I'm having the thought that I'm not worthy of this. Well, that's interesting. That voice in my mind is telling me that I actually should be able to do better. But this is my experience. That's interesting. I wonder why the mismatch. Maybe I don't need to know right now. But in any case, it's making it hard, right? To offer myself compassion. And that can open another doorway to compassion. So there can be these little ways that we just, it's kind of like being in conversation with yourself, right? And, ignore all the things of like, if you're talking to yourself, it means anything bad. Talk to yourself, soothe yourself through your words, and be curious. That's really interesting that I'm having that thought, but it is just a thought, right? I don't actually have to believe it. The thing is that we will believe it until we have evidence that tells us otherwise. And so how do we get that evidence? We have to try something different. And so the self-compassion might be the thing that we try different. And in my experience, it gets easier with time. So, don't dismiss that first kind of sense of like, oh, this is too hard, I'm not doing it. But to come back to where we started, part of the reason why it feels hard is because we are actually just trying to look our suffering in the face without chasing it away. And that is uncomfortable. So if you are uncomfortable when you are offering yourself compassion or when you are offering compassion out, it's because it is uncomfortable. You're not getting it wrong. It is uncomfortable because we're being with our suffering. And I've never known an experience of suffering not to be uncomfortable. So you're doing it right. The key is that we're not sitting in the suffering to like feed the suffering. At the same time, we're not trying to chase it away, but we're saying, well, given that I'm suffering, what can I do that is kind? And how can I remember that I am not in this alone? So yeah, they're my thoughts today. I hope they are supportive. I hope that they are helpful for where you're at. A few little updates before I jump off. First one, I do currently have a few spots for one-on-one counseling. So if that's something that you have been considering and you're like, I don't know if she has spaces, I do have a few. So if you're curious about working on this stuff together, this is a lot of what I do in one-on-one sessions. We actually work with this. We do it together so that, that whole shared humanity thing we do together, because that is often really helpful. So one-on-one counseling can be really helpful if you are going through something that feels very specific to you, and you need some help navigating it. It might be resulting in some anxiety, anxious feelings, self-criticism, feeling like you're always giving to everybody else and never to yourself. A whole raft of things could be going on. But I specifically, specialize in working with other highly sensitive people. So yeah, if you're curious about that, I'll have a link in the show notes, or you can just head to the website ericawebb.com.au. The other thing I wanted to update you on is if you have been waiting to hear about news of the next round of Soma Home, I have decided to kind of like put hold on that. Put hold, is that a thing? Push pause on that. In the same, for the same reason why I had a couple of weeks off the podcast, I've just had to say what can just like simmer in the background for a while, so that I can focus on just a few things, because that's what I have the bandwidth for. So my focus right now is my one-on-one clients, and the SelfKind Hub, which is my online membership space for highly sensitive people, where we have a pretty key focus on mindful movement, but we're going to be expanding that in the next few months to really focus on, the kind of mind-body needs of highly sensitive people. So they're the two ways that you can work with me over the next few months, is one-on-one in counseling, which is, a somatic approach to counseling, or inside the SelfKind Hub, which is going through a bit of a growth spurt, I suppose, and I'm really excited about it. But Soma Home is on hold. I imagine it will come back at some point because I love it, and I think it's an amazing course. I know it's an amazing course, but I can only think about so many things at once. And so this is my kindness towards myself. I was compassionate towards myself, and when, this is, I'm having a hard time, and my business is really important to me, and I need to decide what is the most important things for me to focus on. And so within the business, that has become my one-on-one clients and the SelfKind Hub. So they're the two ways that you can work with me. Doors to the SelfKind Hub are open. They're always open, which, you can find information on the website about that. And I'll pop a link in the show notes as well. All right, that is it from me this week. I will look forward to talking to you soon. Keep being kind to yourself, play with the compassion, and let me know if you have any questions. I would be so happy to answer them. All right, take care.